Doctors of Reddit, what are the dead giveaway signs that someone is faking? Brief note for all the students doctors out there, people can pay stroke field tests and still be having a stroke. I could do everything on the list while I had a clot in my brain, verified by CT and MRI. Except I couldn't stop vomiting. Good times. Be aware sometimes S doesn't look like you think it should. I'm a nurse on a floor that deals with a lot of chronic and acute pain patients. Most recent instance was this lady from a few weeks ago that was apparently splitting the oxycodone we were giving her in half in her mouth, and then when the nurses' backs were turned, she would stuff it in a pill jar. A night nurse caught her in the act and all of her S had to be searched. We found 20 half tablets of oxycodone she had been stashing. She told us that she was saving them for her family in case they needed them because it's just so hard to get an oxycodone prescription these days. I had her a few days after that, and she was having some abdominal pain. Stat X-ray showed only gas. She just really needed to fart. But she was screaming, claiming it was a 10, and making a huge freaking scene. She demanded Dilaudid through her IV, and she wanted it to be pushed fast. Huge red flag right there. She wanted the high, not the relief. Doc straight up said he wouldn't give her Dilaudid because she was already on so many opiates. She then demanded lorazepam, still through her IV of course. Doc was like fine whatever, just one time and only a low end dose. I was flushing her IV with normal saline first, to make sure her IV was patent, and she leans back and is like oh that's so much better already. Hadn't even given her the lorazepam yet, SMDH. Obligatory not a doctor, but I got a call from my son's school nurse when he was in 2nd grade, and the conversation went like this. Nurse sounding upbeat and cheerful says, "Your son wants to tell you his terrible news." Son gets on the phone, says, "Hi mom, I cut my finger off." I ask him, "Where is your finger now?" "Son, I put it back on." I said, "Can I talk to the nurse?" Nurse gets on the phone again, says, "Sounds serious, right?" I asked, "Does he have a substitute teacher today?" Yes. I told the nurse to let him know I will take him to the hospital for a shot for his finger, to which he says I think it's okay. I glued it on really good. Nurse kept him in the office for a bit to talk about scary changes in the clayroom. I went to emergency once with intense chest pain. The young, new doctor I saw first listened to my chest and immediately concluded I had pericarditis, but the supervising doctor decided I was faking it for drugs for some reason. The next morning I woke up to a psychologist in my room asking all sorts of random s when an orderly interrupted because the ultrasound guy was in and wanted to see me first thing, I think after talking to the first doc I saw. Turns out I had pericarditis and myocarditis, and the dude wheeled me out himself and told them order an ambulance to take me to a hospital with a cardiac clinic. My sister is a pediatric audiologist and this is my favorite story of hers. Apparently, sometime in elementary school, usually the early grades, a ton of kids like to fake hearing loss. Like not just "oh, I can't hear the teacher." Full on, want to get hearing aids, etc. Anyway, she explained to me that based on the way she plays the tones, you can usually tell if someone is faking. Especially when they just pretend they can't hear anything. But it's not 100%, obviously, because hearing loss patterns can be really weird. However, she's caught a number of kids simply by saying, "Okay, so I'm going to play a random number of tones and they'll go in both ears. I want you to say yes if you hear it and no if you don't." Right double quotation mark. I don't know why anyone would want to fake anything medical. Unconsciousness in particular. I got a compound fracture recently and called 911 on myself and was put on hold. Fun stuff. But got through and asked them to send help. Operator was a bidet and kept asking me questions to keep me conscious. The ambulance folks arrive, casually got out of the ambulance, walk up to me and then saw the bone sticking out of my body, and said, quote, "Oh. You're actually hurt." Yes. Did you think I called 911 because I spilled some lemonade? Then it occurred to me that most of their calls must be horses. But to cause me even more confusion, I received close to a $2,000 bill for the privilege of actual help and the ride to the hospital. That ludicrous bill is no fault of the M's. I'm very much appreciative of their existence and they don't get nearly enough credit, but the best part of receiving that bill? The ambulance ride was roughly $1,850. The fentanyl they gave me was $2.15. Whenever the symptoms aren't there when the patient doesn't know they're being watched. I had someone fake a stroke recently and walked in on her walking around her room independently, after pretending to be limp on her left side, letting us take complete care of her and wiping her butt for her. It was wild, y'all. One time I was in hospital with decompression sickness and neurological damage and I couldn't pee. I told a nurse I needed a catheter, which she did right away, and I filled 3-liter bags straight off. Anyway, she commented that if a man actually says he needs a long tube pushed up the hole in his penis, then you can be sure he needs it done. I am in the middle of being treated like I'm faking and it's really frustrating. I had a tool slip at work and hit me in the eye and forehead. Knocked me out for a second and I lost sight in my eye. An hour later I started getting my sight back, but it hasn't fully come back. It's been months now. 2 things I got diagnosed with were ocular migraines, and vitreous detachment. And a concussion. But none of those things explain why my vision is still blurry in my right eye. Except the VD, which causes floaters, but my issue is blurry vision, like I have Vaseline in my eye. But doctors keep telling me I'm fine. That I need to go back to work. One doctor told me to think about the economy and that I was lucky to have a job right now, so I quit my job. I still want to see out of my right eye, but none of the doctors are taking me seriously. My favorite thing about this thread is that half of the "here's how you know they're faking" comments get responses that are all, "yeah, about that." Let me tell you how that assumption fricked me over and I almost died. Right, double quotation mark. When I had a stroke 10 months ago, my biggest fear was I was somehow faking it and the ambulance ride was a sham, and why was I doing it? No, it turns out I was having a stroke. I was so worried I was being a faker, although I have never done that before. Just a really odd mental state. I have the reverse. My back went out, extreme sciatica pain, like being struck by lightning constantly. Couldn't move for days. When someone found me 3 days later, they called 911. Just for the doctor to tell me I was faking it for pain meds. While I was crying in pain, I asked him why I lay in a pile of my own P&S for 3 days for some Vicodin when I literally own a bar. Fucking insane. Edit. Thank each and every one of you for sharing your stories. As much as I hate hearing them, at least we aren't alone and we know what each other are going through at some level. Actually, I feel much less alone in the world right now, because I've never met someone in my situation before. But they are obviously out there. If someone is truly unconscious, their thumb always wiggle. Just say that out loud to yourself. Not a doctor but a paramedic. Tons of calls to the jail for inmates with seizures. I lift the arm over their face and let it go. They'll move it to prevent hitting their face, or I'll lightly brush their eyelashes and they'll twitch to it. My wife is a doctor and she had dealt with people faking things like one of their legs simply not working. The trick is to tell them to do some other thing with a positive phrasing, making it seem like doing so will prove the patient's story is true, while it proves the opposite. This works for both people who are actively faking it and people who have subconsciously convinced themselves the problem is real. For example, if they say their right leg can't move, you first ask them to try lifting it, which they try and obviously fail to move or flex any muscles in it. Then you act intrigued and say something like, now your left leg is the one that works fine, right? Go ahead and lift it up for me for comparison. While they are doing this, you still casually have your hand on their right leg, which you had placed there when you were feeling for any activity when they tried to lift it. Now when the person is laying there and lifts their left leg to prove their right one doesn't work, they will naturally flex their right leg to provide balance with their left leg in the air. If they are able to flex their right leg then but won't even flex it when they claim to be trying to move it, then you know their leg still works. You just have to narrow down if they realize are faking it intentionally. I had a 360 testicular torsion and a doc thought I just had some inflamed glands due to my reactions. Luckily I came back after they sent me home or I would have lost my ball. Edit. My highest voted comment by far is about my ball doing an unwanted pirouette. Never change Reddit. Once my doctor accused me of faking to get out of school. I went in with serious stomach issues, and for some reason he decided to tickle me, which instinctually made me fidget and smile. To him that meant I was faking it and he sent me away without checking my actual problem. I was grounded and 15 years later, I still have those stomach issues. Fuck you Dr. Goody. A nurse thought I was faking that I could not swallow when I woke up from jaw surgery. When I came out of the surgery and was panicking telling them I couldn't swallow my own saliva, the nurse just told me yes, you can. This surgery wouldn't have anything to do with your ability to swallow. I could also barely speak and started crying and pleading with her to believe me. I ended up having cranial nerve damage that paralyzed half of my tongue, trachea, esophagus, and vocal cords. It took 8 months to heal. I drank thickened water, which is as gross as it sounds, for 8 months. Having a healthcare professional not believe you during trauma is absolutely scarring. Edit. Clarified that the nurse was the only one not believing me. My surgeon absolutely did. It was scary though because he actually looked frightened when he finally came in to examine me, like he had never seen this before. Second edit. Answering some questions. Surgeon did believe me and the conclusion they ended up coming up for the cause was that my nerves must have shut off protectively due to the pressure of the laryngoscope during intubation. We did see a lawyer, but they said it's very hard to pursue legal action in malpractice cases because it's very hard to prove, but regardless, if I recovered, which I did, there is no case. Yes, I realize this doesn't answer the ARP's question, just saying that maybe health professionals should be careful when trying to discern if someone is faking it. If they're not, it can be extremely traumatic. Surgery was for an ossifying fibroma, a benign bone tumor, in my lower jaw. Had 4 teeth removed and a portion of my jawbone. Thickened water is water with a thickening agent added, usually xanthan gum. When you have damage to those throat muscles, thin liquids are actually the hardest to swallow. I think mostly due to muscle reaction time. My go-to was thick and easy nectar thickness lemon water. You can be faking good too. Had a tooth kicked out. Mouth filled with blood and swelling. I'd stuck a tissue in to try to stop the blood. I've presented to the Tridge at the dental hospital. I'm dribbling blood as I talk. She asks me if it hurts and I said a little bit. She looked at me dead in the eye and said one of the many things we tridge on is pain. Gotcha. Good nurse. Hurts like a motherfucker. I've literally been kicked in the face. Thanks for that. Notes taken. Was patched up and out of there within an hour. Edit. RIP inbox. Lol. And thanks for the awards. Colon. Not a doctor, but doctors often think my family is faking. For an unknown reason, when there's something wrong with our organs, our white blood cell count doesn't go up. My younger sister got appendicitis when she was in her early teens. Crying from the pain, but blood work showed nothing was amiss. If it hadn't been for other tests and my dad's insistence on them, she might not have been treated in time. So they open her up and surprise. A gross appendix that was close to bursting. My dad insisted because of an operation he had just had to remove his gallbladder. He was in so much pain that he was vomiting, could hardly walk. It had been building up for a while and he was pretty sure what it was. He went to the doctor, but blood work showed his white count was normal. My dad had to scream in agony on their table for ages before they finally gave in and took him to surgery. They go in, see a perfectly healthy looking gallbladder. They pull it out, cut it open. And sand spills out. Dry sand. We learned later that it had completely stopped working and totally filled with protein chains. It was removed before it started killing my dad in earnest. So yes, people fake it, people lie. But do double check just in case. Edit. Holy cow. Okay, this is now my most upvoted comment. And my first awards. Thank you. These stories took place over a decade ago, so my details were sparse and sometimes incorrect. So, after double checking with Dad, the stuff only looked like grains of sand. They were deformed trips in protein chains. We learned this when Dad was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder called alpha-1 antitrypsin FM phenotype. It's not fun. His lungs and liver deteriorate over time because of incorrectly shaped proteins getting stuck in his liver cells and not making it to the lungs, to put it simply. And yes, my dad is being studied. Every time he gets a biopsy, doctors gather data because his phenotype is so rare. And I got a couple of details incorrect. It had been a while since this story was told to me. The gallbladder didn't actually look healthy. That was a tidbit from a different story. My father has had basically every organ removed that he can and still be alive. Turns out that my dad found out about the white count thing during his own appendectomy. So, later, when he was in pain again from his gallbladder this time, he made sure he went to the same doctor he had gone through that whole kerfuffle with, and by that point, my dad's severe pain was enough reason to operate and take a look. They found the most diseased looking gallbladder they had ever seen, full of sand. They estimated it hadn't functioned for years. As for the white cell thing, there is a name for it that we've since found out that I didn't know about. But no one can remember it at the moment, sorry. And weirdly, can't find it on Google. Then, this is all exacerbated by biliary dyskinesia. Very small ductwork that is easily clogged. More pain. And to top it all off, Dad was exposed to higher levels of radiation as a child. This on top of winning that dumb genetic lottery that no one wants to win. Thanks again for all your amazing comments and questions. But an exploded inbox is what I get for not getting on Reddit all day. I'll try and answer some. I just want to point out that there are many types of seizures and there's a bit of a stigma surrounding people having them. Some people have focal aware seizures and will be able to respond and control their limbs during the episode. It's dangerous to assume that someone is faking just because they aren't experiencing a seizure, like how you expect seizures to look. Still some time in officially becoming a doctor, but have been taught what to watch out for. Doctor expects symptoms from you, not signs. People who Google diseases often tell students that they shouldn't be aware of refusing blood work, exaggerating your condition description, not matching their history around public holidays, long weekends. Suspicion is always increased. Not a doctor, but I once had a nurse tell me something that stuck with me ever since. I had a gallbladder attack when I was younger, and let me tell you, that's some of the worst pain I've ever felt. I was doubled over, vomiting bile, and unable to move. My mom took me to the ER at 1 AM in the middle of a snowstorm. As the nurse was doing my initial evaluation, she asked me the standard on a scale of 1-10 pain question. I thought for a couple seconds, and told her 7 or 8. It hurts really, really bad. She nodded knowingly, and told me got it, it hurts really bad. Most people who tell me 10 are lying. No one ever feels a 10 inches. In hindsight, I'm not sure that's the best practice for a nurse. Still, after seeing drug-seeking patients myself, I understand her frustration. They ended up giving me morphine, which brought that number down quite a bit. Edit. I want to clarify my, or rather the nurse's, comment. People can definitely feel a 10 on the pain scale, and I don't want to invalidate your experience if you've felt that. I think the point is that if you do feel a 10, the medical providers will probably know without having to ask. Conversely, if an otherwise lucid and calm patient replies with 10, they might not be telling the truth. Not a doc, but figured this is a good place for the time I was accused of faking a broken arm. I was somewhere between 4 and 7, it's a blur so I don't exactly remember when. I had fallen off of a bed and into a nightstand at just the right angle to really mess my arm up. I was screaming and cried out every time I tried to put pressure on it, lift it, etc. My parents take me to a hospital and get me x-rayed, and the doc asks me how much it hurts. Well, of course, the rest of the night I was subjected to the most intense pain child me had ever had, and currently, I wasn't putting pressure on it, so at that exact moment on a pain scale, I had rated it a 2. The actual injury was a 10 and testing it was definitely high on the scale. Because of my low pain rating, the doctor told my parents I was faking and then proceeded to bill us an obscene amount. We get a call 3 days later. Mind you, I was sent home, no painkillers, cast, nothing, saying that someone happened to peek at my x-ray and noticed that I had a pretty large fracture on my elbow. Said I had to come in and get a cast and more x-rays. I'm still peeved at that doctor to this day because he made me feel like a liar to my parents, made me feel like I was being a crybaby, and then made me have an untreated fracture in my arm for 3 days. TL. DR. Doctors of Reddit. Why did a doctor think I was faking having a broken arm, even with an x-ray proving I had one? As a patient, it's apparently very sus if you say you don't want an oxy script. I had some S happen. Doc started filling one out for me, and I told him not to bother, since I wouldn't fill it. He got annoyed and said he wouldn't prescribe anything stronger. I got annoyed and said I didn't ask for anything stronger. For fricked reasons, oxyhydrocodone don't work for me. Advil literally does more for me than any of those, so I'll just take ibuprofen. But apparently the way I phrase that makes doctors think that I'm asking for better meds instead of explaining that I'm just not going to bother with the worthless ones that they default to. Most often their story description exam doesn't make any sense. There are usually things that contradict each other. Abdominal pain is generally easy to tell when people are faking it. For example, I will press with my stethoscope instead of just listening. They don't respond to that pressure but will when I use my hands instead. Sometimes I'll ask them if they are experiencing a symptom that will rule out a diagnosis or make it less likely, and many times they think I'm asking it to support their supposed issues, so they will say they have it. Most of the time people aren't faking but just blow their symptoms out of proportion. When I was doing my EMT clinicals, I was 17, still in high school. We had a guy who called 911 reporting crippling back pain. It was immediately obvious when we got there that he was faking a back injury. We did an evaluation and gave him some OTC painkillers, but he asked to be carried to the hospital. The whole way there he begged for something stronger to ease his pain. After a while, the medic said, "Okay sir, unfortunately we don't carry morphine on the bus, but I'll give you an alternative that we use sometimes. It's called normal saline." He hooked up a knife, and within a few minutes the guy was totally fine, telling the medic that it was good stuff and he was feeling much better. Later, I went back and asked the medic what he had given the patient. I had never heard of it before. He laughed and said, "Good ole normal saline." Normal saline. I'm not a physician but a paramedic. Honestly, I don't really care if you're faking as long as it's halfway believable. I'm still going to treat it as the worst case scenario. Faking a seizure? You'll get a full set of vitals, a blood sugar and a shot of benzos. There's lots of different types of seizures. If you call 911 because you're in extreme pain and want an ambulance ride, I'll put the good drugs in your vein hole. I'd rather give 100 drug seekers or 100 micrograms of fentanyl than withhold it for the one person that really needs it. Can I tell if someone is faking? Yeah, most times, but it goes both ways. If you go too hard, I might assume you have a legit life-threatening injury and sedate, paralyze and intubate you. Or start IVs in you jugular or shin bone. Fake it if you want, but traction may vary. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment.